Today I'm going to talk about my spiritual breakthrough and how I got started with spirituality. My intent today is to strip away some of that cheesiness and give you an insight into what these spiritual people, religious people, what they're really going on about. And so you can potentially look a little bit deeper at life and find a bit more meaning and a bit more purpose. I'm a very skeptical person by nature. And so I wanted to strip away that cheesiness and take you through one of those diary inputs around the time when I had this spiritual breakthrough and a deeper understanding of what's going on. So I'll take you through it step by step. So let's jump into it, shall we not? What happens when you have a spiritual breakthrough? What is it? What actually is going on? And I think for me, the first thing that I realized is we're the ones that are off. We're the ones, when I say we, I'm talking about this really materialistic, scientific point of view that we find ourselves in today. We're the ones that are the deviant from the norm. We're the first generation, pretty much across all cultures and across time, to not be spiritual, to not believe in something a bit more than you can see, touch, taste, hear, or whatever it might be. And we don't realize how limiting that is to us and how unusual that is in the context of history. Everyone, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Taoists, Shinto, Voodoo, Aztec, whatever you want to talk about, Mesopotamia, they all had spirituality at the core of everything they did. And ultimately, what is that? That is the idea that the immaterial, the things that we can't see and taste and hear, they are more important and they're superior than the material. And they come from the material comes from those immaterial forces. Let's take a first thought here. We have consciousness, right? Everyone agrees on that. Maybe you don't agree that we have a soul, but everyone agrees that we have consciousness. And you're thinking, is that material? Is that something you can touch or hear or measure? Is consciousness located somewhere in the body? Is it in the head? Is it in the heart? Where is it located? Like where might you find that? A lot of people would probably say the brain, and the brain is no doubt the thing that's interacting with it the most, but no doubt there is consciousness in all parts of the body. So what is the immaterial? And where exactly does it touch the material, or how exactly does it influence the material in the body? If you start having some really angry thoughts right now, or thinking about someone that annoys you, that is then going to change the biochemistry in your brain and make you angry, which is ultimately affecting the material. And then you have quantum physics. In quantum physics, they ask the question, what is an atom? Okay, let's go a little bit deeper. An atom's made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. And what are they made out of? And what is that made out of? And ultimately, they came to the understanding that everything is ultimately just energy. Think of the famous Albert Einstein equation, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass, and c being the speed of light, squared. So everything is ultimately energy, even if it has mass. And that asserts a pretty interesting thing. Everything is energy. Exactly what the spiritual people have been saying for millennia and maybe even longer. What we see and interact with is only 0.0035% of the light and the energy that's around and available to us. So it is just a tiny, tiny band. And ultimately, all that spiritual people are saying is that greater influence that we might not know or understand right now is having a big influence upon us, whereas the counter view is that it's not having an influence on us, and ultimately that's just ignorance or hubris. And ultimately, I think a lot of the scientific positions find themselves doing a few of those things, but hey, who am I to say? And oddly enough, if you look closer at what the spiritualists are saying, it is exactly the realizations that science is coming to now, that everything is energy and we're nothing but an expression of energy, and nothing really exists until it's seen. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into that. Another example of this is the simulation theory, and that's abundant now in science circles, and you even hear I'm changing timeline and things like this. And scientists love saying the simulation, the simulation. They really have a habit of taking the fun out of everything, or making it seem dull or even scary, you know, rather than something you can incorporate in your life. Well, the simulation, it kind of zaps everything out of it. So everywhere you look, there are these new theories emerging, and all these things that the mainstream is now saying. Religions have said this for millennia. You have the Hindus that talk about the Maya, you have the Muslims that talk about the Dunya, and you have the Buddhists that talk about the Samsara. All of these things are saying this material world is nothing but an illusion. All are saying the same thing. I mean, how crazy is that? So I thought, what the hell? Like, how is it that these guys that sit around praying all day are coming up with stuff thousands of years ago that science is only coming to grips with now, and really struggling to come to grips with, even though we've known about quantum theory for a long time? How is that possible? And consequently, maybe they were onto something. This really got me going. You know, how on earth could this be possible that they're all just sitting around praying and they're light years ahead? And this led me deeper. And that's where I stumbled across the Kybalion by the three initiates, and basically the ideas of the Hermetic Principles. I mean, I'd heard of them before, but I hadn't fully grasped what they were saying and the depth of what they're saying. And ultimately, they could be saying some things that science hasn't got to grips with, even as we speak. And today, I'm going to focus on the first law. The Hermetic Principles are pretty bizarre. When I came across them, I was like, okay, well, who wrote these? And basically everyone has a different answer to that. You know, the Greeks say it's Hermes Trismegistus, the Egyptians say it's Thoth, and the one common theme that you kind of see everywhere is Mercury. So something from Mercury is influencing us. And when you think about it, that's pretty kind of similar to Bitcoin, isn't it, really? That an unknowable, mythical author that no one really knows where it came from. And ultimately, what I discovered and what I focused on a lot, and what really changed the thing that I had to fully grasp to change my worldview, is the first law. And would you know it, everything is mental. The universe is mental. And the first principle is called the principle of mentalism. So absolutely everything is mental. How bizarre is it that something from a millennia ago is something that science is just catching up to right now? And then you find out that all of the secret societies and the religions and everyone knew about these principles. You know, even the Knights Templar, the Golden Dawn, the Kabbalah, where we get the word Cabal from. And everything goes a little bit deeper than you might think. For example, our language is inherited from the Phoenicians, or rather the alphabet is inherited from the Phoenicians. And all of the letters correspond to different sounds that do different things to each of your chakras. It's like, whoa. And we inherited all of that, and they remain true to a lot of these principles. It's just truly bizarre. So maybe they knew all of these things, and maybe a lot of this stuff was hidden in plain sight right in front of us. Take out a dollar bill, have a look at that, see the pyramid symbolism with an eye. These are referencing the same things that are being talked about. Just look at your local municipal buildings, or the courts, or logos and emblems that are important. These symbols are dotted all over. It's easy to just say that, oh, they didn't know what they're doing, they just like the unicorn or whatever, but really, they're using symbolism in a powerful way. And anyway, why is this important? Why am I stressing on about the universe is mental? Because that fully changed my relationship to the outside world. And it started me going, okay, well, what are they talking about? And they're all talking about changing your internal esoteric world. That is far more important than changing the exoteric world. And ultimately, everything that's from the esoteric ultimately becomes exoteric, as we were talking about with thoughts and things like that. And I never understood what Jesus dying really meant. Like, why would they brutally murder someone, and how does that make any difference? How do I learn anything from that? And ultimately, he was embodying and personifying peace and bliss, even though his physical existence was going through the most abhorrent, horrible things. And that's the whole point, is like, hey, he can do this. He's showing you the way. He's leading you the way. And he was the essence, the spirit of that. That's the whole point. And I never understood that before. And once you have a breakthrough of this proportion or this understanding, once you actually start thinking, oh my goodness, maybe the world is an illusion, or maybe this is some sort of a projection, it can be a little bit crazy, but that leads to more breakthroughs and starting to look for evidence and understanding different themes that all these different cultures are talking about, and looking in places that scientists wouldn't even dare. And you can open your mind up and raise your awareness to understanding lots of different perspectives about the world, and not necessarily taking anything as the gospel truth. Science knows the words, but it doesn't know how to sing it. And if you imagine that life is a song, that's exactly how I'd like to say it. It doesn't have the tone, and you're really going to get lost if you try and follow just science to live a fulfilled life. So look a little bit deeper, read through these different things, and you might have a similar understanding breakthrough, which leads to a different perception of the world, which ultimately leads to different behaviors and a healthier way to engage with it. And if you made it this far, ultimately this is your calling, and you are really interested in this, and you're interested in understanding how the world works in a deeper way. You clearly have the interest and the curiosity. So lean into that feeling, and the journey really starts when you have the curiosity of a child and you start looking at everything fresh again and trusting your heart more than, or in balance with your mind, not just letting the mind dominate and get scared and close all the doors. Basically follow your heart, be compassionate, be empathetic, and open the doors. Start thinking, there must be something more, and think about the perennial questions. Who are we? How did we get here? And now that we're here, what do we do? These are the kind of questions that cultures across time, all of time, have been trying to answer these questions. So sit back, read a few myths, read a few of the science that overlaps with everything that's coming up to date, and you will start seeing the same story over and over again. And the more that you read it, the more you understand and can read between the lines, your conviction and your confidence in this will grow. And at a certain point, you will have that breakthrough where you no longer doubt it, or you're open to much greater things. So ignite that flame inside you, light it, trust your intuition, and start going deeper. Lean into that curiosity, and you're going to start learning a lot more about yourself and the world around you. And ultimately, it's the same thing. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And if you've made this far, you're awesome. All right. And I'm going to keep on talking through these different revelations, or rather revelations, the spiritual journey that I'm on. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you're doing things and how you think about it and everything there. So please do let me know. Much love. Peace.